Hi card making friends, it's Sandy here. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to play with a couple of new things from Spellbinders. This is the Naturals Botanic Wreath 3D embossing folder and the Nature's Botanical Garden Sentiments, and that is a BetterPress sentiments. We're going to be using some blending brushes. We need some paint brushes for doing some splatter, and we're using Simon Says Stamps ink in Honey, Taffy, Sage, Amethyst, and we're going to use Night for the Blackout technique. Card 5x7, so the art piece is going to be a 4.5 by 6.5 piece of white cardstock, and I'm going to be spritzing it with the Mighty Mr. Spray bottle on both sides, and I'm doing this over top of my carpet so I don't get my work surface all wet. It really does spritz a lot of water out, so be careful. Now I'm mounting it inside the embossing folder, trying to get an even amount of flowers on each side, and I have my A platform base over here on the right hand corner. It shows you what sandwich you need for the 3D embossing folder. So I'm covering it with the D plate and running it through the Platinum 6. I like to go back and forth a couple of times just to get a nice deep impression. And the reason that I spritzed it first is it helps to break down the fibers so that you don't get a whole bunch of cracking and splitting in your paper when you emboss it. Next up, we're going to add our color, and we are going to use the deboss side, so the indented side of your piece of cardstock. And I'm going to start off with the honey, and I'm using small blending brushes, and I'm just showing you here. Spellbinders has some very nice small blending brushes in 3 different tips. And starting with a small one, I'm going to add the honey or the yellow to the center of each of the flowers. And you'll notice I'm not spending a lot of time on this. You do not have to be exact with this technique because of the ink that's going to come over top. And that's one of the things I wanted to mention was you want to be careful when you're picking your inks. You want your blackout portion or the ink pad to be the darkest of all the inks because it's going to cover any of the ink blending that you get over the edges onto the flat part of the embossed panel. Okay, so now I'm coming in with taffy, and I'm using a little bit bigger blending brush because it's quite a big flower, and I'm just going to work my way around, adding pink to all of those flowers. Then I'm going to come in, and you'll see that I have a little bit of an over splatter, shall we say, with my blending brushes. Don't worry about it. That nice dark night ink is going to cover it. So coming back in with Amethyst, and I'm coloring the second flower in the purples, and I'm splotching off once I ink the blending brush so that I don't get it that big splat right in the center of my flower. And I'm working on the Spellbinders grid paper for this. It's protecting my work surface, and you're really going to need it when you do the blackout technique. I've also linked a couple of other videos that I have done with the blackout and the reverse blackout technique over on my blog post, and I've got that linked underneath this video. Okay, so we're moving on to sage, and we're covering in all of the leaves. Again, not being too precise, and you'll see why when we do the blackout technique. You can add more ink if you want to, but I find this is quite enough. And it gives it a really nice watercolor technique look when you're finished. Okay, so just the last couple of leaves. And we're pretty good to go. Now comes the scary part. All right, make sure you have a protected work surface for this next. And we are going to use a very juicy night ink pad, and we're going to lay it down and run it all the way across our pretty surface. You don't want to press so hard that you're going to get the ink into all of the nooks and crannies, just enough that you're getting the ink onto the background, and it's also going to ink up all that beautiful detail in the 3D embossing. It's scary, but it's really pretty when it's done. And doesn't it give it a beautiful watercolor look? Okay, I'm having a hard time getting the center done there because I've used up all the ink in this end of the ink pad. So I'm just going to flip this around so I've got something to hold on to, and then I'm going to flip my ink pad around to the other end where it's nice and juicy and fill in that center part. And there we go. Lovely. Okay, so you want to set that aside to dry, or you want to heat set it. And while we're doing that, we are going to BetterPress the sentiments. Again, we're using Nature's Botanical Garden Sentiments, and this is a Susan Tierney Cockburn release back in July. I'm a little behind, so I'm trying to catch up. So I've got my BetterPress plate out and I'm adding all the sentiment plates down into that center portion. I like doing these all at once because then that way I've got some spares left over. I tuck them inside the envelope with the rest of the dies and plates, and then that way I have extras on hand if I need them. I have another piece of pink cardstock, which is the same as what my card front is, and I'm going to tape that down to the lid of my BetterPress using the Best Ever craft tape. This stuff is amazing. I love it. I have rolls of it all over my studio. And what I really like about it is you can use it numerous times before you need to get a new piece. Okay, so I'm just doing a dry fit there, making sure that my paper is covering all of my plates. And I also wanted to point out that you want to have a Swedish sponge cloth. Spellbinders sells these. This one's over a year old and I'm still using it. What's cool about it is it doesn't smell because it's all made out of cotton, and it's very absorbent and it picks up the ink off of the BetterPress really, really well. And because I'm using a foam-based ink pad, I'm going to end up getting an awful lot of ink on the surface of my BetterPress. So this cloth comes in extremely handy. Okay, so I'm adding the top with the paper. I'm running it through my Platinum 6. And you only want to run through once so that you don't have any like little shadowing going on. Flip this over. And there's all my sentiments, and I like to clean this right away. I don't like to wait. This is water-based ink, so it's easy cleanup, but again, I do like to get at it right away. And you see on the cloth there how much ink I'm picking up off of my panel. And it's pretty stained with some permanent black ink anyway, but I'm trying to keep it clean. Okay, and I'm also cleaning my plates at the same time. All right, so we're just going to clean up that little mess. We're going to set this aside, and then I'm going to bring in the coordinating dies and die cut the sentiment that I want for my card. Okay, so I'm going to grab a couple of the pieces of Best Ever craft tape from holding it onto my top panel. As I said, you can reuse these numerous times, which is awesome, and they don't tear your paper. Okay, and I have the magnetic mat on my Platinum 6, so I didn't really need the tape, but I do like to tape down my sentiments just so that they don't shuffle at all, because the die cutting is very close to where the writing is. Okay, so now we're ready to make our card base. This is 7 by 10. I'm scoring it at 5, and I'm going to fold that in half. And then I'm going to give it a good burnish with my bone folder. I'm going to pop it back into my Score Buddy and add some adhesive to my card front. And this is a 5x7 pink card front. Okay, and I like to use the top left-hand corner of my Score Buddy just to line everything up and get it down there nice and square. Okay, for the art piece, it's lumpy and it's lumpy on the back. So I like to use this two-sided, double-sided adhesive. It's really super strong. You don't have to push very hard to get it on there. So instead of using a tape runner, which would kind of flatten everything out, I like to use this with a very gentle touch, and it's a great way to hold something that's embossed onto the front of your card. It keeps it nice and flat, and it makes it look professional. And in this case, you want to go around the outside edge and just push everything down because you have a lot of embossing on the backhand side of that. Okay, so now I'm going to add my sentiment to the center, and I've got a couple or 3 or 4 tiny little pieces on my sentiment. So I have cut down my foam squares so that I can get little pieces in there. And then I'm going to add a couple of the larger pieces to the center so that it just doesn't cave in when I mail it. And then you want to take all of the little papers off the back, you know, the ones that you find all over your house or on your dog's feet, and attach that to the center of the card. Okay, we need to do some splatter. I've put my card inside my splatter box, and I'm activating my Splatter White Opaque paint from Spellbinders. It was a little bit on the dry side, so I just spritzed a little bit of water in there, stirred it up with the end of my paintbrush, and activated it. And I'm also going to spritz my gold. This is the Yasutomo Pale Gold, easy for me to say. And while I'm working with the white, the water that I just spritzed in there is going to activate the gold for me. So I'm just grabbing a little bit of water out of my Mighty Mister to water down the white paint just a bit, and then using my paintbrush and splattering, and I'm doing the entire front of the card, including the sentiment. I think it looks really nice that way. Okay, and once I finish with the white, my gold is ready to go, so I'm just grabbing some of that and I'm practicing on the paper towel and then splattering the entire front of the card with the gold as well. Gives us a really nice, pretty finish. Okay, and go back and forth between the two until you are happy with the amount of splatter on your card. A little tip about this gold paint stuff, but there's an awful lot of paint inside there, and it does last an extremely long time. Okay, so here are my finished cards, and I'm just going to hold them up and show you. Depending on how little or how much pink you added, you have deep color or you have light color with a pretty watercolor effect. Everything I've used today is listed underneath this video. There's also a link over to my blog where I share all of the cutting instructions for you, as well as a PDF download for today's card. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please consider giving me a thumbs up and leaving a kind comment. It really does help my YouTube. Thanks so much, and here's another video for you.